Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World, your home for road trips and racetracks. Now obviously we have just come back from our outing up in Minnesota at Dakota County Technical College, and during my post-track inspection of the NSX I did find a couple of things that I wanted to address, and we'll get to that probably in the next video that you'll see. For now though, while I'm waiting on parts for the NSX, I thought I would get stuck back into whatever is wrong with the Gallardo. Now, if you've been following this, you've seen that I've tried a couple of things, and I've been lightly accused of throwing parts at the problem. And while I will own that I only did, I did a lot of reading and research prior to replacing the fuel filters, and really given the amount of people that had had similar symptoms with the Gallardo and how low-hanging and inexpensive fruit that was, it seemed okay to go ahead and just do that. And as it turned out, after inspection, it seemed that the fuel filters that were on the car were original to the car, whereas it should be on its probably third set, given its 67,000 miles. But that notwithstanding, I'm here to sort of vindicate myself in the eyes of all of those who say to diagnose first and then buy the parts. So, I will kind of quickly explain here what I have actually done so far then from a diagnostic standpoint, legitimate diagnostic standpoint on the Gallardo in the search for whatever sort of presumable fueling issue that's ailing it currently. So, first thing I did, since the fuel filters didn't cure the problem immediately, the next thing I did was a static fuel pressure test. So basically, hooked the fuel, unfortunately with the Gallardo there is no Schrader valve or access port on the fuel rail or in the fuel lines leading to the rail. So unless you have lots of plumbing laying around for fuel systems, and I don't, there's no way to do really a dynamic test. So I hooked the filter up to each bank, primed the pump without starting the car, took a reading, timed a leak down on it, or did kind of a leak down observation period on each bank, and they were both the same. Now that's all I can say, because nowhere in the literature for these cars is published a spec for what you should see for static fuel pressure, and that is obnoxious. I really hope that Lamborghini / Audi / Volkswagen Group has gotten their stuff together, for lack of a more polite term there, with respect to how thorough their service manuals are. Quick editor's note as to why sameness is significant here. Even though they're the same part number one side to the other and should perform the same when new, it's worth noting that these fuel pumps were made by Bosch and not Apple, so it's highly unlikely that they would fail in exactly the same way at exactly the same time. I had a thought, because I did some reading that O2 sensors wouldn't always necessarily throw a check engine code or check engine message in the car, but that it might leave the code stored in the computer. So I had my OBD2 diagnostic tool, and I pulled up some of the pending codes. I mean, they're not like active right now, but they're in the system. And indeed, there was an O2 sensor code. Fortunately, as it happens, same with the fuel filters, the O2 sensors for this car cross-reference to any number of Volkswagen Audi products, so I was able to find those for 20 bucks a piece, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to replace, for 20 bucks a piece, I'll replace all 4 of the O2 sensors. So I replaced all 4 of the O2 sensors, and we are out here again today to see if we have, if that has borne any fruit. Now, replacing the O2 sensors on these cars should be a relatively trivial matter. You kind of put the back end of the car up in the air, and you get to them through the wheel well, and in my car at least, only one of them really gave me a problem, and I don't understand why that was, because I put all of these in because the car didn't originally have the cats on it. So when I replaced the cats, I had to put the O2 sensors back into them from where it had been straight piped, which in hindsight, that could have also been part of the problem, because they could have gotten fouled from from not having a cats, or at least the downstream O2 sensors could have. But what we're going to do today then is I actually had figured out that my OBD2 sensor also does, it can do live data, telemetry kind of stuff. So at least for some limited things. Now for the if you wanted to watch the whole suite and all of the data, you would need probably a Dyno and a Lara system to really figure that out. I'm hoping we don't have to go that far because that would get muy expensive though. So what we're going to do though is we're going to go for a drive, and we're going to kind of repeat the experiment, and we're going to both time it to kind of compare against our last few iterations. Although fall has fallen to an extent in Tennessee, so it's about 30 degrees cooler than when I did those last tests. So small grain of salt there. But I think the stumbling and hesitation part, that was happening regardless of temperature. So I'm hoping this is still going to be kind of a valid test. But without any further ado, let's go for a drive, hook up some data, and see what we can figure out. Okay, so as we proceed to somewhere where we can legally do a 40 to 60 pull, I will point out that I've got the OBD2 scanner set up to show a real-time display of the fuel trim for each bank, and that should kind of give us an idea if things are working correctly now, in addition to just our general, butt dyno sensation of, does this feel like what the car should be doing given the inputs that I'm making to the throttle and from the given RPM. So with that said, let's go push buttons and pedals and see what happens. Okay, there we go, 40 miles an hour, and go. And that was 60. Butt dyno felt pretty good. Now I can't actually see the screen of the display because you can see the screen of the display, meaning I have the GoPro in the way. So let me swap that around, and I'm going to go back the other direction and run the same test so I can actually kind of pay attention to what's going on. All right, so having switched directions now, let's see what we got. And I've got the GoPro on the gauge this time, or rather the speedometer this time, because this is our kind of original test condition here that we're working with. Excuse me while I figure out what I'm doing with glare. Get to about 40. Get to our start point here. And go. Yeah, it definitely doesn't fall on its face. So, having done that, let's go back to the garage and crunch some numbers and see if we think we have a healthy bull yet. The butt dyno suggests we are at least getting there. And 60. Yeah, it definitely doesn't fall on its face. All right, folks, well, we are back in the garage, as you can no doubt tell, and I have reviewed the video, and I have crunched the numbers, and I have realized that they're pointless. The numbers, at least, are completely useless, because this is me admitting freely when I didn't know something and have now learned something new, but I did not know exactly how fuel trim worked. And I did not realize that at wide open throttle, which was my deliberate test condition in this case, that it's going to go to 0 because the fuel system is running in an open loop condition at that point in time. So, I have learned something new. Let it never be said that I edit all my videos to make myself look better. I will freely admit when I learn something. But having said that, I was able to go back and look at the rest of the video, the rest of the drive that I did while I had the GoPro pointed at the reader, or at the scanner. And indeed, the car did, under part throttle and idle conditions, always pretty much stayed in that plus or minus 10%. Actually, the vast majority of the time was plus or minus 5% on the short-term fuel trim, which is what you want. Plus or minus 5% is kind of understood as being ideal. Plus or minus 10% is kind of nominally fine. There were only a couple of occasions where I saw a hiccup or trip up, beyond the plus minus 5% range of this car, which is good. Now, again, empirical failure on my part with respect to, some kind of numeric data to prove what I felt. If I had to draw a butt dyno graph of this time, it would be much improved from the last time. We would definitely have a more linear power increase and acceleration, chart or plot rather, which would be way different from what I was feeling before, which was more of kind of a, start, no, just kidding, and then start going graph. Interjecting again, I noticed as I was editing together a before and after comparison of my test runs that my butt dyno graph shape is actually somewhat borne out by the audio profile of the recordings. Look at the shape of these peaks recorded with the same mic placed in essentially the same position and plugged into the same camera. So I had to stretch for it, but there is at least a little empirical data for you. So subjectively, there's definitely been an improvement, and if we look at the kind of comparative acceleration between the 3 or 4 times that I've now done this, throwing the NSX in there in the mix just for giggles, we do see an improvement there. That was probably certainly notable from the first test we ran, obviously with the caveat that it was much cooler. I'd say 30 degrees earlier. I think it's more like it was, the car thermometer said 100 on the first test. It was probably an honest ambient 90 outside the first test I did. This time it was probably a legitimate ambient 75. So, 15, 20 degrees difference, which is notable. But, in neither situation was the car heat soaked. I probably drove it around less before doing this test than I did previously. So as far as its internal heat, it was fully up to temperature, but not hadn't been heat soaking or hadn't been idling in a parking lot for very long. So, obviously some caveat there, but assuming the tests are relatively similar, we did see some improvement. It's still not quicker than the NSX, which is funny to me. I mean, maybe that's just, pro tip, don't roll race your Gallardo against a first gen NSX from specifically 40 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, because you might lose just because the NSX weighs, 500 pounds less. I don't know. But I'll continue to do some kind of research and continue to do some, I'm going to do a little bit more digging now that I know I can do live data on my OBD2 scanner and see if there are some things that I could record or watch on there under wide open throttle conditions that would actually tell me something. And if I find something interesting there, I will be sure and bring it to you. But that's where we're going to call our video for today, is a subjective improvement, although an empirical data failure on my part. But hey, I learned something new and my car feels faster, so I'll consider that a good day. Next week, we should get back to our regularly scheduled NSX programming. I have, again, assuming the parts arrive, from Australia. It's been, I think, almost 3 of the expected 3 weeks of shipping that I was, the expectation that was set with me. So if all of that comes in, then we will dig into some suspension and steering repair or maintenance. I don't know, call it. Nothing's broken per se, but it's a little bit off. But anyway, I'll get into that. That's another video. That is next week's video, more than likely. If it's not next week's video, then maybe we'll do some more tests here. But otherwise, we'll try and get the NSX ready for our next adventure. And on that note, I am Richard. This is Lap of the World, and I will see you guys in the next video, if not at the track.